Utilitarianism is one of the most common of moral systems. Most people are more or less just moral intuitionists, but when it comes to proper moral systems, utilitarianism is one of the common ones. The basic idea of understanding the morality of an act through its consequential generation of pain or pleasure is fairly easy to understand and quite appealing as a moral framework. Many people align themselves with utilitarianism. An unfortunate consequence of this seems to have been the boiling down of utilitarianism to its most simplistic form. This form represents a reductive and outright harmful understanding of utilitarianism as a moral system, an understanding which perverts utilitarianism and makes it a far more detestable moral system than it really is. Many utilitarians engage in a reductive moral analysis. They look at the obvious pain and pleasure generated by an act. Looking at obvious pain and pleasure is very important, but it is not the be-all and end-all of utilitarianism. We need to be more nuanced and imaginative when considering consequences. When morally analysing an action and its consequences, we must also consider the following. Normalisation, because rational actors want to normalise good acts and avoid the normalisation of bad acts. Impact on the propagation and encouragement of desirable emotions, attitudes, and behaviour, because rational actors want to encourage certain emotions, attitudes, and behaviour, and discourage certain emotions, attitudes, and behaviour, depending upon their desirability. Implications, because rational actors desire a coherent, consistent, and rational society, rather than an irrational, incoherent, and inconsistent one. Impact on the maintenance of strong reciprocal moral systems, because rational actors want to maintain a state of affairs in which people treat others well and get good treatment in return. And a whole lot of other stuff. This is a handful of examples of the far less obvious stuff that we should be considering. Some people would say that these things aren't technically consequences. Some people would be wrong. These are consequences, and they are factors that we must consider. Considering these things makes our moral analysis accurate, complete, and nuanced. We can truly understand what makes something good or bad by considering all of its consequences, even the less obvious ones. Moral analysis needs to be complete, nuanced, and accurate if it is to be useful. Looking at things simply through one lens will inevitably lead to us misdiagnosing the morality of an act. Obviously, misdiagnosing the morality of an act could lead to terrible consequences and great harm. Morality exists more or less to tell us what actions are desirable and undesirable when it comes to our relations with others. If a moral system does not take into account the complex factors at play, then it fails to make a useful and productive diagnosis. A moral system that fails to take into account the nuance and complexity necessary for an accurate moral diagnosis is a failed moral system. It is a moral system that does not serve us as well as it should, or as well as it could. It could lead to us labeling behaviour that we should label moral, immoral, or behaviour we should label immoral, moral. We need nuance to truly understand the consequences of an action and the factors at play. We need to understand the consequences of an action and the factors at play to make a productive and useful moral diagnosis. Making a productive and useful moral diagnosis is something that any rational actor desires. It is also the purpose of moral systems. It is rational to apply nuanced and complex moral analysis. We must consider more than immediate and obvious consequences. I am confident that the moral analysis of utilitarianism's founders took into account some of the more nuanced and complex consequences. Some time ago I read some of the work of Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. I recalled a description of the more complex consequences a utilitarian must consider. Upon returning to the book, I could not for the life of me find it, but I remain confident that it is in there, and that this is something they covered. In order to be its best self, utilitarianism requires nuance and the consideration of complex and often easily overlooked consequences. We must dispose of reductive utilitarianism and restore this great moral system as the nuanced, intricate, productive, and useful form of moral analysis that it has so much potential to be. Consider the unconsidered and easily overlooked consequences. Consider every factor. Actions, ideas, and systems are often terribly complicated things. It only makes sense that our moral analysis should be too. Complicated and nuanced moral analysis is not something to fear. It is something to embrace as the desirable and necessary means towards constructing the ideal society. We should do our moral analysis properly. We should do our moral analysis without giving in to the impulsive desire to reduce it down in such a way that vital considerations are ignored. A productive and useful analysis is a complex and nuanced analysis.